Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Neil Hamilton from Canterbury Tech and I've got the t-shirt to prove it. So thanks so much for joining us for this, our second lunchtime tech session. I am going to share a couple of slides for 2 minutes just to highlight a few things I'd like you to be aware of, and then I'm going to hand over to Doug. So let's try this. So hopefully this is why you've joined. If this isn't what you're expecting, then see you later. But before we go any further, I'm going to acknowledge the date. It's 15th of March. So as many of us who live in Christchurch are aware, 3 years ago today, there were the terror attacks on the mosques in Christchurch. I will certainly remember where I was that day. Just like to acknowledge those who were killed and injured and continue to suffer the effects of that day. So today we've got Doug Dixon, CEO of Catalyst Cloud, joining us shortly. But before we do that, ripping through a few slides. We're always happy to see new members. Thanks so much. If any of these companies or people are on the call. I think it's a summary of a few people have joined in the last 2 or 3 months. So welcome to you all. We have, as usual, a sprinkling of companies, individual members, and the usual plethora of student members. Welcome to all. We need you. Yes, we do. Not only is Debbie, our ops manager, leaving, so if you or anyone you know might make a suitable ops manager for Canterbury Tech, please get them to get in touch. We're also looking for a couple of associate committee members, one with sort of a storytelling marketing background to help shape where we go on that front over the next year or two, and the other who's keen on improving the linkages between industry and the tertiary education sector locally. So if either of those are your thing, please get in touch with us. And the date, yes, we have a date. Tech Summit was, as many of you will know, canned finally at 2.5 days notice in January of this year. So we now have Tech Summit 2022, November the 24th. It's a long way out. Yes, it is. But we do know there's going to be a whole heap of events towards the end of the calendar year. So we want to be your priority. We want to get that date in your diary. It is, as usual, going to be our usual amazing event, great networking, good content. So please put the date in your calendar and look forward to seeing you then. And Tech Week, Canterbury Tech's the local coordinator for Tech Week. This year it's, as in other years, at the end of May. The event submissions are now open but close relatively soon. So if you or other folks in your network might be interested in running an event during Tech Week, please go see the website and get into it. I'm particularly keen, I guess, to get some events going which are aimed at youth, teachers and schools to encourage more people into the tech sector in future, and also events aimed at the general public to whom we'd like to be more aware of what's going on in tech locally. So please take a look. And here's a few other upcoming events. I'm not going to go through them blow by blow. Maybe the first one's worth a mention. NZ Tech and IT professionals have been working hard to get these 600 immigration class exceptions. It's a drop in the ocean, really, being able to bring 600 people into the country to fill some of the huge number of vacancies. But there is a webinar on tomorrow on that front. So if you're a recruiter and feel that's of interest, please join. And that's about all I had. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to welcome Doug. And in welcoming Doug, I'm going to fade into the background. Doug's going to rip through some slides do some talking, and then we'll circle back at the end to do some Q&A. So if you have some amazing questions about cloud and the like, or maybe something specific about Catalyst Cloud, please put them into the chat, and we'll pick a few out and ask them towards the end of the session. Thanks so much to Doug. Over to you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui ka koutou katoa. Hi everybody, it's great to be here. First time caller, so please bear with me. Not done one of these before. Thanks for the intro there, Neil. Set me up nicely. So my little chat today, I've been told, is on this slide here. So the state of cloud computing in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and some observations from where I see things as CEO of Catalyst Cloud, and the role that cloud computing may play in our future digital strategy. The particular topics that I'll chat about are security, sovereignty, and its relationship with residency. And I may touch on a couple of examples from overseas. First topic, I won't dwell on this for too long, but I will go into it because I know there's a wide audience. So what is cloud computing? Cloud computing is today's dominant paradigm in IT infrastructure. As you know, it's not new, but it is entering the final stages of universal adoption. In a nutshell, the cloud is a natural evolution of IT hosting. Rather than owning and running their own hardware and software platforms, organizations can provision IT services virtually, on demand, instantly and scalably on somebody else's computer, as the saying goes, and pay for only what they use. So cloud is much more than hosting or virtualization. It has 5 essential characteristics according to NIST. I won't go into all of those unless you would like me to later, but I can. But the combined effect of them is that we get virtual computing infrastructure that anyone, anywhere can buy and use on tap. In some ways, it attempts to turn computing into another utility or commodity like water or electricity or the internet. But unlike traditional utilities, cloud providers are not required to offer directly compatible services. They can differentiate their products and services as they wish. Depending on who you talk to, this is known as innovation or vendor lock-in. Also, unlike utilities, the cloud provider industry is global, not local. You can buy your cloud services from the other side of the world if you want to. So please take brief note of these 2 unintended characteristics of cloud computing as it exists today: cross-jurisdictional reach and potential for vendor lock-in. Neither is necessarily a good thing for customers, but they are used by states and corporations respectively to exert control, and we'll return to that theme later on. So cloud computing, genie or master. Cloud is now the foundation on which everything else is built by default. Government, economy, and consumer services for both. The control plane and data plane of human society are now both firmly in the cloud. Cloud computing has gone from skunkworks experiment to critical global infrastructure in just 20 years. And it's been so successful that we can no longer function as a society without it, literally. Some examples of cloud leverage in the public sector in New Zealand, for example, we have RealMe, the National Digital Identity Service. This is being moved to the cloud. In the Department of Health, we have the immunization register in the cloud, COVID tracer, My Vaccine Pass, and other systems. In education, a lot of the school systems are being moved wholesale into the cloud. Countless departments, government departments, I'm sure you've all sort of know of a bunch of examples, have completed cloud migrations or are in the process, or the throes, if you like, of doing so at the moment. And of course, you have the ubiquitous use of Office 365, another sort of SaaS productivity suite in the cloud. So it's not really hard to see why this is happening. The cloud first policy from Cabinet requires it. So just quoting from digital.gov.nz, the government's cloud first policy requires its organizations to adopt public cloud services in preference to traditional IT systems following risk assessments. So this pattern is kind of quite strong in government. It's also very strongly reflected in the private sector. So banks are today dependent heavily on cloud infrastructure and systems for their operations, and increasingly so. Recent announcements from Kiwi Bank confirm that trend, and I can't think of a single bank which isn't using the cloud heavily. Insurers, the agriculture sector, increasingly using the cloud, primary industries. Transports, well-known airlines use cloud systems for their operations as well. Telcos, the supply chain systems, for example, supermarkets. So the cloud is undeniably a great technological innovation, but one on which we have not just bet the farm, we've bet all the farms. Cloud is therefore simultaneously genie and master. We are now inextricably dependent on it. Our destinies are intertwined. The remaining questions are all about how we manage this relationship and make the most of the opportunities while minimizing the dangers. So, who owns the cloud? This is a profoundly important question because whoever owns the cloud controls the future. If data is the new oil, then cloud providers are the new global oil fields. And just like oil fields, they give enormous strategic power to the nations that own them. It's no coincidence that today's top 6 cloud providers reflect the current geopolitical leaderboard. They're all either American or Chinese. They are Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Alibaba, Google, and Huawei. Together, these 6 companies control more than 80% of the global cloud provider market. The fight for global economic, political, and social domination is being played out in the cloud, where digital empires are real empires, rising and falling. Perhaps what is most interesting is the geostrategic polarization in the cloud provider industry. It's dominated by 2 mutually hostile superpowers. If you're not the USA or China, and you can't or don't want to build your own cloud capability, you need to pick sides. Consequently, the rest of the world has largely split along expected geopolitical lines. In the EU, for example, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google account for 66% of the market, followed by local players like Deutsche Telekom in Germany and OVH Cloud in France, with about 2% each. In Australia and New Zealand, the picture is even more pronounced, with US cloud providers enjoying near total dominance in both government and private sectors. Geopolitical fault lines, like geological faults, often appear fixed and reliable, so nobody really notices them. And sometimes this illusion can remain for years or even a generation. But over time, the tectonic plates of countries and cultures collide, and ground is won and lost. Alliances strengthen and weaken. Power is exerted in different and sometimes surprising ways that can change everything. Old friends become enemies. Old enemies can become friends. Look what happened in the last century for countless examples of this cycle. As well as this cultural continental drift, sometimes there are geostrategic earthquakes, ruptures that bring about sudden and sweeping changes to entire nations and peoples, invariably accompanied by bloodshed. We don't need to look particularly hard at the moment for examples of this. Technology has always been at the forefront of cultural prowess, political dominance, and conflict. Perhaps the technological advancements in World War II are the best documented, from the incredible innovations of the Spitfire in the UK, the V2 rocket in Germany, and the defining moment that brought the war to an end, the atomic bomb developed in the United States. Even and especially when not in use, technologies define the boundaries and deterrents that keep nations peacefully interlocked in a state of equilibrium. But it is a constant and unrelenting arms race, make no mistake. So who cares? Why does it matter who owns the cloud providers you're using? What is at stake? So what if every New Zealand citizen's data, their identity, financial, personal, tax, social, criminal, educational, and health information is stored in and controlled by foreign-owned companies? So what if our national data assets, libraries, documents, and archives are stored in offshore controlled systems? So what if our government, military, and security services depend on a foreign power for their systems of democracy, governance, and self-determination? So what if Māori data by Māori or about Māori, or the environments that they have relationships with, is held outside of the jurisdiction of New Zealand, out of sight of Te Tiriti? The answer to these questions is sovereignty, in every sense of the word. Not just digital sovereignty or data sovereignty, although these are important, but also the national sovereignty of Aotearoa New Zealand. There are 2 quite separate risks to our sovereignty that I want to talk about. The first is that foreign-owned cloud providers are subject to the laws of the country where the cloud provider was established. In the case of Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, that's the United States. This means that the United States government can exert legal and other pressures on US-owned cloud providers, regardless of where they are physically located throughout the world. Data residency is not data sovereignty. European countries are particularly concerned by the privacy implications of using US cloud providers. For example, just this month, I think last week, Denmark released its guidance on the use of cloud and dedicates quite a large section to the topic of cloud in the United States. The US Cloud Act provides that a cloud service provider may be required to preserve, backup, or disclose the contents of a wire or electronic communication and any record or other information pertaining to a customer or subscriber within such provider's possession, custody, or control, regardless of whether such communication, record, or other information is located within or outside of the United States. This means personal data processed by a subsidiary of a US cloud service provider is typically considered to be under the US parent's possession, custody, or control, and therefore may be required to hand over personal data to US authorities. Of course, the wider concern is not just the US Cloud Act, which exists today, but any future legislation or act by any US agency that has influence over US-owned cloud providers. The second risk to our sovereignty is that New Zealand is increasingly reliant for the very running of our nation on the products, features, prices, availability, terms, and conditions of cloud providers completely outside of our nation's control. To the US cloud hyperscalers, we are little more than a customer, a tiny one at that. In a worst case scenario, our government could not prevent any of these cloud providers from exiting the market and thereby leaving chaos and potentially ruin in their wake. Don't think for a moment that US cloud providers would nobly sacrifice a commercial advantage for New Zealand's greater benefit. I refer you to a US company named Amazon that only last year pulled its $1 billion plus Lord of the Rings TV show out of New Zealand at short notice and at huge cost to our economy. No negotiation, no apology. These are the same people with whom we are currently in the process of entrusting our digital government and economy. By concentrating our nation's critical systems in a handful of overseas private companies, we are placing those systems beyond our control. As we've just seen, the role of cloud in Aotearoa's digital future can hardly be overstated. Everything that doesn't depend on it today will soon. And we've also seen that the ownership and control of the cloud, especially for strategically critical systems or systems with high privacy requirements, is equally important. But beyond that, what is our digital strategy and how can cloud support it? In October last year, the government published a discussion paper called Towards a Digital Strategy for Aotearoa. Its vision was enabling all of Aotearoa New Zealand to flourish and prosper in a digital world, which is great. David Clark, the Minister for the Digital Economy and Communications, said in his foreword, New Zealand's future prosperity lies in sustainable, high-value jobs producing goods and services with a lower carbon footprint. Technology connects people and markets, is the pathway to tomorrow's jobs, and helps combat climate change. That strategy is constructed around three key themes. Mahi tika, trust. And just to quote it briefly, in order to be comfortable and confident in using digital tools and services, New Zealanders must have trust in how they work and how their data and information is stored and shared. Creating and maintaining a trusted digital environment is a foundational step towards realizing our vision of enabling all of Aotearoa New Zealand to flourish and prosper in the digital world. The second pillar is mahitahi, inclusion. This is about ensuring everyone in society can access and benefit from digital technology. It's about improving the availability, accessibility, affordability, and skills for all New Zealanders. The third and final theme is mahi ake, growth. This is about accelerating the growth of our technology sector and increasing its contribution to our economy. It's envisaged this will be through encouraging digital adoption by businesses and government, increasing export earnings from our technology industry, and also by growing the talent pool so that we get bigger and better qualified tech workforce, earning more and contributing more to society. If that's what we want, then how does cloud help us to get there? It's my belief that we in Aotearoa can export our technology to the world, including cloud computing technology. We can build a trusted sovereign cloud as the foundation of our digital future, fostering inclusion and supporting Māori data sovereignty. We can build our tech talent pipeline from schools through university and higher education institutions to produce world-leading cloud engineers, not just developers who build on top of existing cloud services, but engineers who build the cloud itself. we can create a prosperous future together where we are increasingly connected to the world, but where we enjoy sovereignty and self-determination as peoples united under tutelity. The end.
Thank you, Doug. That was thought-provoking. I'm not seeing a lot of questions in the chat yet. Luckily, I have a few I prepared earlier.
Have you now?
As to seed a bit of a conversation, let's dive into a few of those. Catalyst Cloud recently announced you'd been appointed as all of government cloud framework agreement by the Department of Internal Affairs. What does that mean for you?
What that means is we have a level playing field with the existing cloud framework agreement holders, Amazon and Microsoft. And that means that it's much easier for a government agency. And by government agency, it's actually much wider than that. It's any eligible agency, and that can be local authorities, education, schools, or pretty much anyone that the DIA wants to nominate, can use a pre-agreed set of wording and contracts and go via DIA and very quickly and easily procure cloud services and enjoy good conditions with Catalyst Cloud.
The big incumbents, namely AWS, there they are. Yes, they are a sponsor of Canterbury Tech. AWS and Microsoft announced some time back that they were going to plow vast sums of money into building data centers in New Zealand. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a good thing for them. They're doing it for an investment, obviously. It can be a very good thing for New Zealand as well. I don't think what I'm saying is that the hyperscalers are inherently a bad thing. They're absolutely a valid provider for some types of services, some types of cloud workloads. But what I'm saying is that when we have critical systems, strategically important systems with high privacy requirements, where you need a sovereign cloud provider, then they're probably not a good place to put your data. Unless you're taking a lot of other measures, including encryption and making sure you're very careful about where your keys are kept.
Well, here's one from the chat, a good door opener for you here, Doug. Who do you envisage can build a New Zealand cloud?
Who could do that? Catalyst Cloud might be able to do that. We actually have. We've been operating a public cloud in New Zealand since 2014. Built on the OpenStack cloud platform, which is an open source set of cloud projects which provide infrastructure and platform as a service cloud. So it's us, Catalyst Cloud. That's a great. I did not plant that question, but it's what a wonderful question.
Mariana from Focus Group asked that. So look, you might want to get in touch with her, just saying. What are you noticing in terms of managed database in the cloud? I know you have some offerings on that front. Is that on the up? Is it going to become a much bigger thing? What do you observe?
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, we're having great uptake in managed database. It's one of those services which you know, do you want to employ a DBA team to do what is quite a repetitive bunch of administration tasks, and you'd have to sort of solve your own problems for a lot of the activities that a managed database can provide. So yeah, absolutely great uptick in that. So yeah.
I'm just going to rattle through a few other questions. Andy, I assume that's Paulson, maybe not. If China and US providers are unacceptable risks to our IP, what are the alternatives? I think you've answered that one. There is a New Zealand alternative, I think.
Hopefully, and I'm certainly not looking for you know, exclusive domination of the New Zealand owned cloud provider market. If other companies want to, you know, jump in and provide part of that platform, that's absolutely brilliant too.
Well, here's one from me. It must be difficult to compete with those big providers who have very, very deep pockets. How
Yep.
do you differentiate? How do you attract and retain customers when your war chest must be much smaller than theirs?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, that's a really good question. That's kind of the key question for us existentially as a company. So yeah, AWS and Microsoft and Google and so on got to where they are today through revenues and investment, not earned in New Zealand at all, earned overseas in much larger, more wealthy markets. And they've been on an exponential feature and revenue growth, making them even more powerful. Coming from little old New Zealand, we don't have those deep pockets, but we are local Kiwi innovators. We don't buy our cloud, we build it, and every single line of code that we write on OpenStack is pushed upstream. The open source ethos is a big differentiator. The other big differentiator is the fact that we're fully New Zealand owned, and so Catalyst Cloud is subject only to New Zealand laws and nobody else's.
Perhaps in that vein, Josh asks, we implement a lot of US cloud solutions for clients. Do you view the imminent build of data centers in New Zealand by AWS and Microsoft as solving some of the issues around data sovereignty?
No, not even close. They will solve latency issues, but not sovereignty issues. So sovereignty is about having laws of a country apply to your systems, your data, your capability. The sovereignty over, for example, a data center in Auckland that's owned by an American company is a complex jurisdictional quandary. Yes, there are some laws which they must, New Zealand laws which they must abide by. There are also American laws, and the US, as I discussed, the US authorities can make demands over that company and what it does with data.
Okay, how about one from Paul? One of the benefits of cloud is having backup locations offshore for failover. How would you promise, or how do you deal with, I think, this for Catalyst, having it all onshore in New Zealand escalates the risk, especially with us being on earthquake zone, for example?
Well, we mitigate the risk by having multiple regions within New Zealand, so it's that's how we spread the risk out, and that by hundreds and hundreds of kilometers between data centers. So that's how we do that. We consider the jurisdictional risk to be greater than the geological risk.
And of course, many of us are based on the South Island. I noticed there was a bit of a blank on the map when it comes to Catalyst Cloud data centers on the South Island.
Right. Yeah, we've been looking there, and we still are, absolutely. And as soon as it can possibly happen, we will be moving. We're looking to open data centers across the South as well.
Here's an interesting one. The EU, the GDPR in the EU, New Zealand was named as an adequate country, which sounds a bit condescending to me, but anyway, we know that has specific meaning. That allows personal data to flow to New Zealand from the EU as if it's part of the EU. Has Catalyst Cloud seen much uptake from overseas companies using cloud in New Zealand since the advent of GDPR?
We have, yeah, we do. We have seen quite a number of overseas customers sign up. We don't know what they do. I mean, obviously, part of our ethical approach is that we don't go and look at what people are running in our cloud. I expect that some of them are here for GDPR purposes.
What about the mix of on-premises and cloud and hybrid approaches, private cloud? What would you observe is happening in that space? There's a lot of movement and alternative approaches being adopted at the moment. What do you see?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, Catalyst Cloud, we operate a public cloud. We also operate private clouds and have done successfully for a number of years. There is quite a lot of interest in both private cloud, but also community cloud, for example, for educational institutions or for parts of the public service, where it's a lot like a private cloud, but with multiple tenants, multiple classes of tenants within those cloud deployments. So I guess, and you'll have seen this everywhere else, that there's talk of public, private, hybrid, and various sort of combinations of those. And we're actually got our hands in all of those different types of deployments.
One from Stella. What examples might you cite that Catalyst Cloud is meeting the sustainability agenda? Or I'd actually expand on that to say what are Catalyst Cloud's values in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really timely point. We are 100% of renewable energy powered in our data centers, and we are in the final stages of being audited. We're in the audit phase of carbon zero certification. So it's important to us and has been for many years. This isn't a process you suddenly decide to sign up to. We've been on believing and living that value for some time.
And one from Greg, where are the Catalyst Cloud DCs in New Zealand? Are they owned, run, managed by Catalyst or someone else? And
good question.
Biggest customers?
Oh, where do I start? So the data centers it's a mix of owned and run by ourselves and leasing space in other people's data centers, and that's something that the hyperscalers also do. So Microsoft and Amazon will do the same thing when they come to New Zealand as well. That we're in Hamilton, Wellington, and Porirua currently. We talked about hints of wanting to expand and to come down south as well. We have a number of decent sized customers: Sky TV, Māori Television. We've got Electoral Commission, a number of decent large customers.
And what about management of cloud services these days? I notice you have some sort of Kubernetes offering. What are the big users of cloud using to manage those sometimes very complex environments?
Well, the good thing is everything on Catalyst Cloud is API driven, and so you can use whatever tooling you're familiar with already. So Terraform, for example, is a very common way of orchestrating cloud deployments and so forth and upgrades. So the answer is you can use any tooling that will work with OpenStack, and OpenStack is the most widely deployed cloud in the world.
How about one from Vaughan? What sacrifices do you need to make to keep all data in New Zealand? Does it kill off being able to adopt mainstream SaaS solutions? In other words, is there a trade-off?
Oh gosh, well, yeah, there's a trade-off for sure. We're not Amazon. We don't have the weight of Amazon's brand or Microsoft's brand to attract large SaaS offerings. However, we're building a marketplace where SaaS offerings can easily be deployed over the top of Catalyst Cloud's infrastructure and platform services. So, yeah, if I had it my way, we would have had a big chunk of investment around about 2002 to get us on the same exponential trajectory. We are where we are though, but we do have a fantastically talented group of cloud engineers, and we've got the goodwill of a lot of software providers around the country who are wanting to have a presence within our platform. So back us, because we are working hard.
Another one from Josh. Catalyst Cloud obviously do IaaS, but a lot of the issues you're highlighting around data reside in SaaS solutions. Do you see any solution for this, given that those SaaS solutions have been developed on a global scale, not easily replicated by any company?
Yeah, no, yeah, you're dead right. So that is tricky. There's a couple of options. One is to get those SaaS solutions working on top of Catalyst Cloud. And we've been in a number of conversations with SaaS providers where that is absolutely possible. For example, if they have containerized solutions that power their SaaS platform, we can accommodate those. The other one, and it's more of it's a bit earlier probably in its evolution, is considering Catalyst Cloud as, I guess, the data plane for a chunk of applications where there's a lot of sensitive or private data, and not putting that into your SaaS solution, for example, or obfuscating it before doing that. So there is a case whereby to be very careful about this stuff, you still can use SaaS, but you just have to put in some controls.
But difficult to do after the fact.
Very difficult to do after the fact, and a very good point. Bringing back solutions, repatriating data to New Zealand is much more difficult to do than keeping it here in the first place. Dead right. But it can be done, and it should be done.
So where's it, get your crystal ball out? What do you see happening over the next couple of years? What's keeping you awake at night? And what are you thinking about doing now that's going to affect the trajectory for Catalyst Cloud over the next couple of years?
Well, look, we have just got a big agreement with DIA, with all of government. So that's the big sort of turning point for us. There's also a lot more cut through around data sovereignty, Māori data sovereignty, where those conversations are actually starting to turn into actions, which is extremely encouraging for me. So I guess it's those two things. It's getting in closer relationships certainly with the public service and trying to advance that narrative around data sovereignty, plus our own capability. That if we were to reinvest a fraction of the spend that we currently have on overseas cloud within this economy, can you imagine the difference that would make? It would be enormous. So that's a huge part of the conversation. And then the other one is again, having closer relations with private sector and iwi leaders around data sovereignty, Māori data sovereignty.
Here's one from a potential job seeker. As a student of cloud, what's the skill Catalyst Cloud are looking for? What's sought after? Or perhaps broaden it out a bit, what sort of people do you employ with what sort of skills and experience? Good, curious, smart people is the first skill that I like, and everything else is a bonus. Look, if you want to get technical, OpenStack is the set of projects and components that we use, and as I said, it's a great place to come and work, because every line of code you write on an OpenStack project, it goes upstream, and we've had a number of people from our company who go on to lead those projects. In fact, Catalyst Cloud contributes upstream to OpenStack more than any other company in the world per employee. So that's certainly a big plus for us. The languages that we use are predominantly Python for OpenStack, but it doesn't matter. If you're a good techie, you're a good techie. What is your rough head count, if you're prepared to share?
400 million. No, 35. We're a small crew. We're all over the country, by the way. So we have a number dotted through the South Island, Christchurch, Blenheim. We're in Rotorua. We're in where are we? Auckland, Wellington. So we're all over the place.
Here's one from Jeff, which I was sort of going to ask as well. Are you seeing companies building in order to easily move between cloud providers? As you mentioned earlier,
yeah.
Those cloud providers are quietly looking to lock in their users.
Absolutely.
So are the user organizations getting a bit smarter about it and building apps so that they can move between different clouds?
It's okay. So just being slightly self-aware here, it's probably impossible for me to know, because the people that come to us are probably the ones that have containerized their applications and that can actually, they've looked at what we do and can port, and there are lots of those. The ones that haven't and that are deeply sort of leveraging particular cloud providers' services and well, they can't really move very easily, and they probably haven't sort of decided to.
And this is an interesting question from Dimitri. Consuming cloud and SaaS services, a lot of it is about identity management, authentication, authorization. How do you envisage a sovereign cloud in New Zealand when all identities are managed and stored in a non-sovereign cloud, e.g. Azure AD? Do you have active approaches? Identity, it's a tricky question, right?
That surely is it. That's an, was that Dimitri?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Well, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head, my friend. And it's like we've got to this point as a country where we've got, identity's too hard. We've tried Realme. Oh, bugger it. Let's just stick it in Microsoft, you know. We're going to have to wind back a couple of decisions and look at this a little bit more carefully, I think. Look at how we can do this in an open, transparent way. Remember, the pillar of trust is the first in the digital strategy for Aotearoa. If we can't manage our own identity, what can we do? You know, the stuff is the first thing that we need to get right. Whatever
happened to Realme? It's there, but
I don't know what happened to it. I mean, it's probably a different tech talk. You have to find the people who can maybe rustle up a few skeletons on that one.
and hold a wake or something, should we?
A seance, maybe.
Josh, you're prolific today. For SaaS solutions, if we're to develop those scale solutions in New Zealand, won't the global market face exactly the same issues in hosting their data in New Zealand that you see with us hosting offshore? Isn't the counter true also?
Well, so you've got there's two answers to that. One of them is your SaaS solution can be deployed on multiple clouds and multiple sovereign clouds if you want to. Yeah, so you could have a business model that quite easily caters for that. You could even, if you know, you could move your SaaS solution to OpenStack, running wherever you like in the world, because there are providers all over the place. And you could also move it onto equivalent services on the big players if you wanted to. The other answer to that is that, you know, and again, if you look at the digital strategy, we like to see ourselves as a very trusted nation, and we are. We are a very trusted nation as it stands at the moment. If we can build on that brand, people might prefer to store some of their data in New Zealand as a backup because we are trusted. That's not to say that we enforce it, but we could be a welcome haven for some. And I've seen customers from South America, for example, you know, buy a NAS device and then spin up their backup to come to New Zealand. So that's another model that we might look at.
And a great suggestion from Stella for a future one of these sessions, get Alan Bell from Digital Identity. Good, yep. Like that. I might ask you for an intro, Stella. Thank you. And look, I'm going to move towards wrapping this thing up. If you feel that you have a burning question that absolutely must be answered, use the reactions and stick your hand up. Otherwise, I'm going to thank Doug for joining us. It's been a stimulating conversation. Some tricky things to address there, and we certainly don't have all the answers. One last thing though, what does Catalyst Cloud do in terms of helping organizations make the move from other cloud providers to Catalyst?
We provide development grants for particular projects where you need some help getting the right architecture to move across is one thing that we do. We also have pre-sales architecture capability where we can come and just talk to you about and give you some advice on that. We have a bunch of documentation as well, and some tools and some examples, certainly all of these things. Happy to put people in touch with our team if you want.
Okay, and I think that's a wrap. Lots of thanks coming in, and I'll add mine to that. Thank you so much for joining us, Doug, and giving up not only an hour of your day, but time to prepare as well. I know you spent most of last week's holiday thinking about this. Anyway, nice. We'll stop there. Everyone else on the call, the next one of these is in 2 weeks' time. And right at this moment, I've completely forgotten the subject matter because I've been immersed in cloud. We will publicize it very shortly before the end of the week. Please join us in a couple of weeks. Meantime, that's all for now, folks. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Doug.
Kia ora.
Thanks.